It all kicked off on a gloomy Tuesday morning. I had just dropped off one of our most annoying clients at the airport, the kind of guy who could suck the energy out of you in under an hour. He had been complaining nonstop since I picked him up, and by the time I was done with him, I needed a break. I was in no rush to head back to the office, so I decided to stop somewhere quiet and grab a bite. About a mile down the road, I spotted an old, worn-down bar and grill. The kind of place with creaky booths, dusty ceiling fans, and no pressure to smile or chat. Sounded perfect. I figured I would enjoy a slow lunch and maybe a couple of cold beers before jumping back into the workday grind. I found a booth in the corner and ordered a beer. While I sat there, sipping and thinking about whether this place could possibly serve a decent burger, something, or rather someone caught my eye. A couple had just walked in. They picked a booth across the room and sat close. Real close. The woman was hard to miss. A curvy blonde wearing a tight pink top and a short skirt that showed off her legs. She had the kind of presence that turned heads whether you wanted to or not. The guy with her looked like he was trying a little too hard. Skinny jeans, black leather jacket, slick hair. He had that fake tough guy look about him. At first, I did not pay them much mind. But then the woman turned her head, and I saw her face. It was Lori, my sister-in-law, and the man sitting across from her, that was definitely not my brother, Mark. Before I could even fully register what I was seeing, they were already kissing, his hands sliding up her thighs like they were in some sleazy motel room, not a public restaurant. I was stunned. My first reaction was to march over and call her out, but I knew I had to keep a lid on my temper. Confronting her was a given. The real challenge was doing it without causing a scene. Truth is, I never liked Lori. Not from the beginning. When Mark first introduced her, something felt off. She seemed self-absorbed, superficial. Mark, who was 23 at the time, thought he had struck gold. They got engaged just 4 months after they started dating. I had my doubts, but he was in deep. She could do no wrong in his eyes. To give credit where it is due, their first few years of marriage seemed happy enough. Mark doted on her, and she soaked it up. But watching her now, all over some other guy, told me whatever they had was long gone. I walked across the restaurant and slid into their booth without asking. Lori's eyes snapped open. Her smile froze. Her boyfriend backed off fast, already shooting me a look like he was sizing me up. I ignored him completely and leaned in, all casual. "Well, hey there, Lori," I said, nice and smooth. She looked like she had seen a ghost. I turned to the guy and said, "Name's Tom. I'm Lori's brother-in-law." He looked from me to her, then back again, and mumbled something before standing up and heading for the exit like his hair was on fire. Lori watched him leave, pale and shaking. I leaned back in the booth and looked her in the eyes. "So," I said, "Mark not cutting it anymore?" She could barely get a word out. I started asking questions. How long this had been going on, if this was her first time, or just the one I caught. She tried grabbing my hand, begged me not to tell Mark. Her voice shook, and for a second, I felt almost sorry for her. Almost. Then, out of nowhere, she tried flipping the script. She claimed my wife, Beth, was having an affair. I laughed in her face. I figured it was a cheap distraction, a pathetic lie to protect herself. But she stuck with it. Said she was serious. That Beth had been sneaking around with some guy from her gym for weeks. Claimed Beth had confided in her about it. I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was bluffing or not. She looked steady now, like she was telling the truth, or at least convinced herself she was. Beth and I had been together 10 years, 7 married. She had always been loyal, honest, grounded. The idea that she might be cheating seemed impossible, but I could not entirely dismiss it either. I did not react, not openly. But inside, I was rattled. I sat back and thought about what to do. I knew I could not let Lori's betrayal slide. Mark needed to know. But if there was a chance, any chance that what Lori said about Beth was true, I had to find out. I told Lori I might be open to some kind of arrangement. I said I did not want to believe Beth could do something like that, but I also was not willing to be played for a fool. So I gave her a deal. Help me prove Beth was cheating, and I would keep quiet about what happened today. But she had to swear, to cut things off with that guy. No more cheating. No more sneaking around. She'd jump at the chance. Said, "You have my word." I doubted it was worth much, but I nodded. Then I asked her how far she would be willing to go. I needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. So I laid out a plan. I would give her a tape recorder. She would invite Beth over, open a bottle of wine, and get her talking. A casual heart-to-heart between two women. With any luck, Beth would open up. I want to know everything: who the guy was when it started, how often they met, and why. As I explained the plan, I caught myself almost starting to believe Lori. And that made me angrier. Lori agreed to everything. Even said she would start by making it seem like she had a secret of her own to share. Maybe even pretending I'd cheated just to get Beth to open up. I asked her again, was this guy Jake the only one? She swore he was. I did not believe her, but I let it go. 20 minutes later, I was driving back to the office, my head a mess of thoughts. 2 marriages on the brink. Mine and Mark's. And I had no idea which way the truth would fall. I wanted to call Mark right then and there, but I knew it would not help. He had always been the charming one, outgoing, passionate. He had idolized Lori from day one. Even if I told him everything, he would not believe me unless I had rock-solid proof. Still, I could not shake the feeling that Lori was telling the truth about Beth. Maybe she made it up in a panic. Or maybe she was not lying. When I got back to the office, I started making notes. What I would need to do if my marriage really was over. Stuff like sorting credit cards, moving titles, prepping for the worst. That night when I got home, Beth was in the kitchen, setting the table, humming like nothing was wrong. She gave me a big smile, wrapped her arms around me, and kissed me like always. The same sweet, steady wife I had known for years. We ate dinner together, talked like any normal couple. But then she mentioned going to the gym, and I could not help myself. I made a light joke, something about whether they were offering free desserts now. She laughed, but I noticed a slight flush in her cheeks. She told me how good it felt to work out, how much better she felt in her clothes now. Said her black slacks used to be tight, but now they fit just right. And as I sat there, watching her smile, looking as beautiful as ever, a wave of doubt rolled over me. Could she really be hiding something from me? I did not have answers yet, but I knew this much. My marriage, as I knew it, had changed forever that day. Even if the court did not recognize it just yet, for me, it was already over. A week later, also on a Tuesday, Lori and I were ready. We had worked out all the details. I gave her a small tape recorder to tuck away somewhere in her living room, and she invited Beth over for lunch since Beth had the day off. Lori, who did not have a job, pretended to be busy with things, but all day long she kept sending me vague updates. I could not concentrate on anything. I just kept wondering what the two of them were talking about, and if my life was about to change for good. At 4:30 that afternoon, my phone rang. Lori told me they were finished and Beth had just left. My stomach dropped. I asked if Beth said anything, if she had actually admitted to anything. Lori, sounding a little buzzed from the wine, allowed a tipsy laugh and told me yes, Beth had opened up. Apparently, she had shared all about her lover and made sure to mention that he was, in her words, a big guy. I hung up, told Lori I would swing by in 20 minutes. When I got to her place, she met me at the door and handed over the recorder. She reminded me of our agreement, that I had promised not to say anything to Mark. I nodded and gave her my word again. I also made it clear that Beth must never know this recording existed, because if she did, she might tell Mark everything out of spite. Lori agreed, and I left. That night was one of the hardest I have ever had. I could not listen to the recording until Beth went to bed, so I kept playing the part of the loving husband. She was in a cheerful mood, probably thanks to the wine she had with Lori, and she was feeling affectionate. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered if I had something for her tonight. Part of me wanted to say no right then and there. But another part, the one that remembered all our years together, wondered if this might be the last time. So I followed her to the bedroom. But it did not feel like love. I was numb. We lay there for a while afterward, and then she pulled me in for round 2. Afterward, she fell asleep fast, snoring softly. I got up, grabbed the recorder, and headed to the guest room. I shut the door, sat on the bed, and hit play. The tape started with harmless small talk between Lori and Beth. They laughed and sipped wine. Eventually, Lori came clean about her affair with Jake. It became clear Beth already knew. Lori was just adding dramatic details, probably to smooth her way into the real reason for the chat. She mentioned Jake was not the first. There had been a guy named Ryan before him, who had since moved away. Beth laughed and pretended to be shocked, but it was obvious she was entertained. None of that surprised me. I already knew the kind of person Lori was. If anything, this just made it easier to confront Mark later on. Then Lori shifted the topic. She asked Beth about her experiences. She brought up someone named Andy, teasing Beth about how she had only mentioned him vaguely, mostly about him being well-equipped. I tensed as Beth's voice came through the speaker, laughing and describing him as the biggest she had ever seen. She even talked about how she had doubted he would fit at all. Both of them cracked up like a couple of high school girls. I paused the tape, leaned back, and took a long breath. My heart felt like it was splitting down the middle. That was it. My marriage was done. Still, I had to hear it all. So I pressed play again. Lori asked how it started. Beth answered honestly, too honestly. She said she never meant to cheat. She said she loved me, that we were happy, and that she did not even recognize herself anymore. But then she laughed and mentioned something called BTF. She promised to explain it after another glass of wine. Beth said she had been working out at the same gym for years, mainly to stay in shape and keep me interested. A few months back, a new trainer showed up. His name was Tyler. He was built like a linebacker and loved flirting with the women. One day, she saw him talking quietly with Judy Hawthorne, a former coworker. Later in the locker room, Judy looked dazed, smiling, glowing. When Beth asked what was up, Judy joked that she had come down with a bad case of BTF, short for big tool fever. Judy shared everything, how Tyler had flirted with her, pulled her into his office, and rocked her world. Said it was the wildest sex she had ever had. At first, Beth thought it was funny, but then her curiosity started to grow. Over the next few weeks, she paid more attention when Tyler flirted with her. During one session, he helped her with a bench press. When she looked up, his shorts were revealing. He caught her staring and smiled. She nearly dropped the bar. After she finished, he grabbed her hand and pulled it to his shorts. Beth admitted she was frozen, unable to think straight. He led her to his office, locked the door, and without saying a word, stripped down. What followed was wild, passionate, reckless. Beth said she was exhausted and filled with guilt afterward. She went home, acted normal, and did everything she could to keep me from noticing. The next night, she made up for it in bed, overcompensating so I would not suspect anything. For 2 weeks, she avoided the gym altogether, scared of what might happen if she saw him again. But eventually, she convinced herself it had been a one-time thing. She was a good woman with a loving husband, and she could resist temptation. Except she couldn't. She went back. Tyler winked, flirted, and eventually cornered her again. And just like before, it ended in his office. Beth told Lori she had no emotional attachment to him. It was physical, lust. She called him God's gift. She admitted she had seen him 2 or 3 times a week for nearly a month. Said it even made things better at home because the secret turned her on. Listening to all of this, my stomach turned. I sat in that room until almost 2:30 in the morning, numb, sick, and furious. There was nothing left to say and no reason to sleep next to Beth that night. I quietly slipped into our room, grabbed a change of clothes for the next day, and left without waking her. By 6:30, I was out the door. I left a short note on the kitchen counter, saying I had an early meeting and was sorry for not mentioning it sooner. It was vague enough not to raise alarms. Later that morning, I made 2 copies of the tape at the office and then called Mike, an old college buddy who worked at a law firm downtown. I asked him to set me up with their toughest divorce attorney. No delays, no hesitation. Mike was stunned. I could hear the sympathy in his voice, but he did not ask questions. He set up a meeting with one of their senior partners, Laura Winslow, someone he described as a lawyer who made other lawyers nervous. When I met Laura, I knew instantly she was the real deal. She shook my hand firmly and looked me right in the eye. No nonsense. I played the beginning of the tape for her and Mike. Within minutes, she had her assistant hold all calls. We sat there and listened to the entire thing. When it ended, she turned to me and said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" I told her I wanted a divorce based on infidelity. I was not interested in hiding behind irreconcilable differences. I told her I would split the savings fairly, but I wanted the house. And I wanted Beth to take back her maiden name, because she had not earned the right to keep mine. Laura nodded and asked for a moment with Mike to review the legal details. 5 minutes later, she came back ready to move. She said everything would likely go through smoothly. Beth would not want that tape aired in court. Still, she warned me that since Beth did not know she was being recorded, the tape might not be admissible in court. I told her about Lori, about the deal we made, and how Lori's part of the tape could be used in my brother's divorce if needed. Laura's eyebrows went up. She said in Mark's case, the tape would be admissible because Lori knew she was being recorded. There was no defense there. That divorce would be simple. Then she smiled and said, "You two sure picked quite the wives." She apologized quickly, realizing she had gone too far. But honestly, I appreciated the honesty. She wrapped it up by saying we might even have a case against the gym. Tyler might not have much to his name, but the club would not want that kind of story coming out. She thought we could push for a settlement, maybe even in the high six figures. Laura gave a short laugh, cool as ever. Then she told me, "I'll get started right away." Mike walked me out of the law office, offering another apology before I left. He assured me that Laura was the right person for the job, that she would take care of everything. I forced a smile, even though I felt like I had been run over emotionally. "It's all right, Mike," I said. "On the bright side, this might finally free up time for us to get back to playing tennis." He smiled weakly. I thanked him again and left. That afternoon turned into a whirlwind. I called a locksmith to change the locks at the house, scheduled for 4:30. I also made plans to meet Mark for dinner that evening. I did not want to be home when Beth got back. I canceled her credit cards, moved our money into separate accounts, and started drafting a letter, my final goodbye to her. That letter took longer than I expected. Turns out, it is hard to write to someone you once loved with everything you had, even after they have betrayed you. Once I finished, I sealed it in an envelope, wrote Beth's name across the front, and brought it home. The locksmith wrapped up by a little after 5. I sat in the kitchen, drinking a beer in silence, trying to make sense of everything. Before I left, I taped the envelope to the front door and locked up for the last time. Beth was usually home between 6 and 6:30. I wondered what would hit her first, finding out her key no longer worked or reading what I had written. Our marriage is over. Now you can spend as much time with Tyler and his oversized equipment as you want. The locks are changed. To pick up your things, contact my attorney, Laura Winslow. She will arrange a time for you to come get them while I am not here. I will not be speaking with you again. You broke my heart. I loved you with everything I had, and I had always imagined us growing old together. Too bad the vows I took seriously meant less to you than a fling at the gym. That evening, when I met up with Mark for dinner, he picked up immediately that something was wrong. Once we ordered, I took a deep breath and told him everything. Beth's affair, the tape, the divorce plans. He stared at me like I had just punched him. His jaw actually dropped, which I had never seen before. "Oh my God, Tom. Beth? Are you sure?" Then he caught himself, realizing how dumb the question sounded. "I mean, sorry. I can see it in your face. You're sure?" He asked if I wanted to talk about it, and I did. So over beers and steak, I told my best friend all of it. The pain, the betrayal, how I was trying to hold myself together. Near the end of the meal, I let him in on another part. "There's something else," I said. "I didn't just find out by chance. Lori helped me get the proof." Mark blinked. "Lori?" I nodded. "She got Beth to talk. She recorded the whole thing." Mark paused. His voice dropped. "I'm really sorry, man. And I hope this doesn't upset you, but I have to admit, I feel lucky to have Lori. She has always liked you, and it doesn't surprise me she would help. I know you never gave her much credit, but she is a good woman." I could not take hearing any more of that. "Mark, don't say anything else. Please, let me take care of the bill, and I need you to come back to the house with me. There is something you need to hear." When we got home, I found a note stuck under the screen door. It was addressed to me in fancy handwriting, definitely from Beth. I tossed it on the table without reading it. Then I led Mark into the guest room. "Listen," I said, "I love you like a brother, not just because you are my brother, but because you are one of the best people I know, and I need you to hear something. I need you to stay seated, all right?" He looked confused but nodded. I went into the next room, rewound the tape to the beginning, and came back. I placed the recorder on the table in front of him and hit play. Then I left the room. A few minutes passed before I heard the crash. Mark had knocked something over. The tape was still playing, but he was pacing like a storm was building inside him. I stayed in the kitchen until the tape ran silent. When I finally walked back in, he turned to face me, and the look on his face was something I will never forget. Fury, betrayal, heartbreak, all mixed together. "You knew," he said. "You let me sit there praising her, calling her a good woman, while you already knew. You knew, Tom. You just sat there and let me talk. Do you think I enjoy this?" I shot back, standing. "Do you think this has been easy for me?" He kept going, accusing me of taking pleasure in it, of using this as a chance to rub my dislike of Lori in his face. My voice rose again. "You think I wanted this to be true?" I shouted. "I found out a week ago, Mark. 1 week. I have been holding it in, trying to find a right way to tell you. But you never would have believed me. Not unless you heard it from her own mouth." My anger faded as I saw his shoulders sink. His fists loosened, and he sat down slowly, broken. "Sorry," he mumbled. "I know you are hurting too. I cannot believe it. I still can't." I sat across from him, quieter now. "You remember that fight we had, when I said something about the way Lori spoke to Mom? You barely talked to me for weeks. I knew you would not believe me this time either. We stayed up late, sharing beers and going over every painful detail. I told him how I had seen Lori and Jake at the restaurant, how she had offered me a deal, how I had handed everything over to Laura Winslow. When I mentioned that Laura was willing to represent him too, he said, 'Good. I did not even want to see Lori. I just want out.'" That night, Mark stayed in the guest room. We ignored the phone as it rang again and again. Eventually, I just left it off the hook. Days passed, weeks even. Beth kept calling, sometimes crying, sometimes begging. I never answered. She came by my work a few times, but I had already warned the receptionist to keep me informed. Whenever she showed up, I left through the back. A few nights, her car was parked out front. I just drove around until she left. Laura handled everything. The divorce papers were served quickly. Beth's lawyer tried to claim there had been no cheating, but once he got a copy of the tape, that excuse vanished. He argued the recording was inadmissible. Laura just smiled and waited. As the court date approached, Beth's attorney called and asked for a settlement meeting. The day after hearing the tape, Mark left Lori. He waited until she was gone, then called me. I helped him pack his things. We had everything out of that apartment in 2 hours. "I don't want to see her," he said, tears forming. "I don't want to hear what she has to say. I just want to get away from her." I turned my head, feeling the same weight. I understood every word. Lori left me some angry voicemails, full of curses and blame. Nothing like Beth's pleading, regretful ones. After a couple of days, I started screening all my calls. Deleted any message from either of them without listening to the whole thing. Laura even tried calling Mark at work. Sent him letters. He never responded. Laura took care of his divorce too. We just handed it all over to her and let her handle the mess. Surprisingly, the lawsuit against Tyler and the health club wrapped up fast. Tyler did not exactly vanish into thin air, but he sure disappeared fast. Nobody could track him down, and frankly, I did not care. What mattered was the health club's reaction. They were desperate to keep their name out of the news. They reached a settlement with me for $1 million. I signed a confidentiality agreement and walked away with the biggest check I had ever held in my hands. Less than 10 weeks had passed since this all blew up, and in that time, Mark and I had become our own kind of support system. 2 freshly single men living like college roommates, grabbing dinners out, hitting up baseball games, and sharing beers late into the night. Sometimes we talked about Beth and Lori, sometimes about life, and sometimes we just sat in silence, knowing the other guy understood. We reminded each other that it was not our fault. Mark told me Beth's cheating was not a reflection on me, just proof she was a mess. I told him Lori's actions had nothing to do with him and everything to do with her selfishness. Neither of us fully believed the other at the time, but it still felt good to hear. Mark's divorce wrapped up first. He had no interest in seeing Lori again, so Laura handled everything. She told us Lori had tried to fight for more money, but with that tape, she had no leverage at all. When the final documents were ready, I went with Mark to sign them. Lori had already signed hers. Mark just gave Laura a tight, grim smile, shook her hand, and walked toward the men's room. I waited outside, and when I heard him crying, I did not go in. I just stood by the door and gave him his moment. 3 weeks later, it was my turn. We met on a Tuesday, me, Beth, and our attorneys. Beth's lawyer had agreed to the settlement, but asked for two things: that I drop the claim of infidelity and agree to meet with Beth in private before we signed anything. I told Laura I would sit down with Beth, but I was not backing off the cheating claim. Eventually, we agreed that if Beth could convince me otherwise during our conversation, I would consider changing it to irreconcilable differences. I will admit something that sounds crazy. I was actually curious about what she had to say. After 10 years of loving her, I could not imagine ending it all without hearing her out one last time. While I walked into the conference room, Beth was already there. She was wearing that blue dress I always loved. Her hair was shorter now, but she still looked beautiful, just paler, more fragile. "All right, Beth," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is your meeting. 2 rules, though. Don't tell me how much you love me, and don't say it was just sex." She flushed and teared up immediately. "Tom, I'm sorry, but how can I not say those things? I made a huge mistake. I was thoughtless and selfish, and I hurt you. But it was just sex. Meaningless. Stupid. I wished 100 times I could go back and undo it." I stared at her cold. "Yeah, but you did do it, didn't you?" I turned away and looked out the window. I could hear her crying softly behind me. "It meant nothing, Tom," she whispered. "It was the dumbest, most damaging thing I have ever done. But it had nothing to do with you. I never stopped loving you." I let her talk. That voice, the one I used to love, now felt like a stranger's. There was nothing new in what she said. No revelation. No truth that would change anything. Eventually, I sat back down and looked her in the eyes. "For what it's worth," I said, "I still love you too. But this is over. You destroyed the one thing that mattered just as much as love, trust." I took a breath and continued. "How could I ever be with you again, Beth? I would wonder every time, are you thinking about me or him? Are you making love to your husband or missing Tyler and his body? And every time you're late from work or step outside to take a call, I would be wondering all over again." She said nothing, just sobbed. "You took something from us, and you can't give it back." After a while, she whispered, "Please, baby, just one more chance." I looked at her and said, "Let me ask you something. What if the roles were reversed? What if I found some woman who offered me something you did not? What if I spent a few weeks sneaking around, sleeping with her just for the physical part, and you found out? Could you forgive me? Could you take me back? Could you look at me the same way again?" She met my eyes, the sadness in hers cutting deep. "I've already asked myself that question over and over," she said. "And honestly, no, I couldn't. I would not be strong enough. I would feel hurt, betrayed, insecure. I would probably leave." "Then you're asking me to do something you couldn't do," I replied gently. "You want me to be stronger than you?" She nodded, through tears. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. I want to prove to you, every day for the rest of my life, how sorry I am, how much I love you." We sat there in silence. Then, finally, I stood up. "I don't know if I can't, or if I just won't, but I'm not that stronger person you want me to be." I paused at the door and gave her a chance to speak one last time. She did not. She just sat there crying, head down, shoulders shaking. Laura was waiting for me down the hallway. Her usual no-nonsense demeanor had softened. "Just listed as irreconcilable differences," I told her. "It doesn't matter anymore." A few nights later, Mark and I sat at my kitchen table. We had a few drinks, not drunk, just loosened up. "Listen," I said, "I've been making some plans." He nodded. "After paying off the lawyers, I still have around $800,000 from the settlement. I invested most of it, but I kept 50 grand out. That's for the Tom and Mark Harris Recovery Fund." He raised an eyebrow. "We're going to spend it." I grinned. "I rented us a 2-bedroom condo in Cancun. For weeks. We leave in 2. You're taking time off, and we're going to act like 2 fun-loving single guys. Cheerful divorces." He looked at me sideways. "Not that kind of cheerful, right?" I laughed. No. I meant happy, not gay." He rolled his eyes, but the tension broke. It was the first real laugh we had shared in weeks. Cancun turned out to be exactly what we needed. Sun, tennis, the beach, cold drinks, plenty of them. We did not go wild, but we definitely loosened up. We were not the same sad men we had been just weeks earlier. Day by day, we felt lighter, stronger, Mark, for all the damage Lori had done to his confidence, was slowly getting his spark back. My brother has always been good with people, especially women. He is funny, charming, and looks you straight in the eye when he talks. That kind of energy does not stay down for long. He had this move that worked surprisingly well. He would spot two attractive women, walk us over to their table, and smile. "Ladies, I know it would be strange to let a total stranger buy you a drink, so let me fix that. This is my brother, Tom Harris." Then I would chime in, "Nice to meet you both. And this guy right here is my brother, Mark Harris." And just like that, Mark would take it from there. Mark always finished the line with flair. "Glad that's settled. May we buy you a drink?" By then, the women were usually smiling or laughing, and more often than not, we had company for the evening. Sometimes that company lasted until breakfast. The women down in Cancun, just as eager to forget their troubles as we were. Nobody was chasing anything serious. We were all just looking for a little distraction. In those 4 weeks, I ended up spending the night with 6 different women. Mark? I stopped counting. Most of it was harmless fun. Drinks, dancing, stories swapped over cocktails, and a few hours of connection that meant nothing more than a shared need to feel wanted again. The first couple of times I was with someone, I found myself distracted. It was hard not to think about Tyler, the man who wrecked my marriage, and the way Beth had described their time together. It messed with my head more than I wanted to admit. Even though they were both 1,000 miles away, they still took up space in my mind. But the women I was with never noticed, or at least they never let on. And with each new experience, I started letting go of that shame, that comparison, that baggage. One-night stands might not be for everyone, but for us, they were just what the doctor ordered. There was one, though, who stood out. Her name was Erin. Tall, red hair, Irish roots. She was about a year younger than me. We went through the usual steps: drinks, dinner, dancing. She was confident, funny, quick-witted. And when we finally made it back to my room, things happened naturally. There was chemistry, real chemistry. That first night was fun, no doubt. But something changed around 3 in the morning. I woke up and just stared at the ceiling for a while. Erin was asleep beside me, breathing softly. And out of nowhere, the weight of everything I had been holding and crashed down on me. I started crying, quietly, but I couldn't stop. She woke up, rolled over, and pulled me in her arms. "Let out, baby. It's okay," she whispered. I was embarrassed, but I let her hold me. And slowly, I told her everything about Beth, the affair, the fallout. I laid it all out there while the sun started rising through the curtains. We ended up in the kitchen making breakfast, and Erin shared her own story. She had been divorced too. No affair, just a husband who slowly stopped caring. He buried himself in work until there was nothing left between them. She had been on her own for 2 years. After breakfast, we went back to bed, but it was different this time. Slower, more tender. We looked into each other's eyes. We held hands. It wasn't just about release or distraction. It was connection, real and raw. What I thought would be a one-night stand stretched into 4 nights of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. When she finally left, I was quiet for a while. Mark, being Mark, picked up on it right away. He asked if I was okay. I told him Erin was different. He nodded. She seemed great. But hey, she's gone, and we've still got 10 days of this trip left. Then he threw me a tennis racket and pulled me out the door. That evening, we met a pair of secretaries from San Francisco on their first trip abroad. They were bubbly, curious, and just excited to be somewhere warm. They went back to their hotel that night, but the next afternoon, one of them, Karen, ended up in my room for what she said was her first international experience. 8 months have passed since that trip. Mark's got a nice place now, modern apartment, close to downtown, but we still hang out a lot. One night, we went out for steaks at a spot we both liked. Just as we were settling in, Mark leaned across the table and spoke low. 2 couples just walked in. One of them is Beth. She's with someone. I paused, let my heart settle, then slowly turned to look. Sure enough, she had already seen me. She gave me a small, steady smile. I nodded, gave her a polite wave, and turned back to Mark. He asked if it was the first time I had seen her since the divorce. I told him it was. I didn't expect it to shake me up, I admitted. But I guess seeing her in the flesh again kind of jolted me. We agreed not to talk about it. I did not want to pick apart who the guy was or how she looked. I just wanted to enjoy the rest of my steak and let it be. Mark changed the subject, telling a funny story about a coworker who had been flirting with him constantly. He was not interested, but he had to admit the attention was kind of fun. We were sipping coffee, watching couples dance on the floor nearby, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Hey," she said. That voice, so familiar. I turned, stood up, and looked into Beth's eyes. She looked good. She asked if I would dance. For old time's sake. I said yes. We moved together easily. The rhythm came back just like that. It was strange how familiar her body felt in my arms. Her scent, her warmth, the way her head tilted when she smiled. It brought memories rushing in. Our wedding dance, lazy Sunday mornings, the way she would hum while cooking. We kept the conversation surface level. Work, the weather. Then quiet. It was comfortable, and also heartbreaking. At the end of the dance, she looked up at me and asked, "How are you?" Really, I could have shrugged it off. I didn't know her anything, but I answered honestly, "I'm okay. Some days are harder than others. Seeing you here tonight brought up more than I expected." She nodded, eyes soft. "I miss you every day," she said. "And being in your arms again tonight, it reminded me what I lost." I didn't say anything. The music ended, but she didn't move. Then she asked, "Do you ever wonder if you made the right decision?" I met her gaze. "I wonder all the time," I said. But I never get past the part where I ask myself why I had to make it in the first place. When I dropped Mark off that night, he gave me a concerned look. "You good?" he asked. I smiled, kind of, "Yeah, just part of living in the same town. It was bound to happen eventually." He nodded. "Tennis tomorrow?" "Of course." And I drove home. Quiet. Alone. But okay.